Hello, Kitchen Pals, and welcome back to Miss Abby's Kitchen Class. I hope you're having a good week so far. Today is Veterans Day in the United States, and we're honoring military veterans for their service in our armed forces. It's a day when we thank those people who have kept our country safe. Veterans Day first became a holiday after World War I ended. President Woodrow Wilson acknowledged this day in November of 1919 by saying the day would be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of the nations. What an important message. Anytime I see someone in a military uniform or somehow signifying that they fought in a war or served our country, I always thank them for their service. And perhaps you will do that too. In honor of our veterans, we're going to make something patriotic in color today. Our berry parfaits will have three separate elements: blueberries, because you know how much I love this gorgeous berry; a raspberry coulis, which is basically a thick raspberry sauce; and whipped cream, which we'll make from scratch. Once we make these three elements, we're going to layer them into a glass dish so that we can see those red, white, and blue colors together. Now we know a bit more about Veterans Day and our berry parfait. We need to get to work in making this dessert. Let's get to the kitchen. Hey, Kitchen Pals, welcome back to the kitchen. So we're gonna get started on our berry parfaits by first making our raspberry coulis. This has to heat up, and we're gonna cook it a little bit on our stovetop, and then we need time for it to cool down before we make our berry parfaits. So let's get started with this. So first of all, we're going to add 1.5 cups of mostly frozen berries. I took these out of the freezer about 45 minutes ago, but then I also added some fresh berries that I had in my refrigerator. So there's kind of a mixture of thawed raspberries and some fresh raspberries, minus this one that I'm going to eat right now. So I've got about 1.5 cups of raspberries that are either thawed or fresh. And then to that, I'm going to add 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. And then 1.5 tablespoons of orange juice. Now, listen, if you're a grown up listening to this and you're not making this for children and you would like to substitute orange juice for Grand Marnier liqueur, be my guest. I've got my heat on to medium high, so that's set at about a 7 or 8 on my gas burner here. And I want to bring this up to a good boil, and then I'm just going to simmer it for a little bit. And what I want to see is those raspberries kind of breaking down so that they're not holding their raspberry shape anymore, that they've kind of started to break down with the heat and the sugar and the orange juice. So let me stir this on our heat for a little bit. And you can see as I'm cooking this, I'm kind of mashing those raspberries down with the back of my spatula here. And that just kind of helps with that process of breaking down those raspberries. It doesn't matter so much how it happens, it mostly just matters that it does happen. So we'll mash these raspberries down with the back of our spoon and then keep them stirred for a little bit over this medium-high heat. Okay, I can see this starting to come to a boil. There's just a couple of bubbles coming from around the edge of my pan here. So I'm going to turn my heat down to medium, so about a 4 or a 5 on your gas burner if you have that. And just keep mashing those berries up. Okay. Gosh, this smells good. Berries and sugar and orange juice. Oh my. This sauce starts to thicken a little bit as we add our heat to it. Okay, so all of my berries are mashed. I can tell just by stirring it that my sauce has thickened up just a little bit. So I turn my heat off, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use an immersion blender. Do you have an immersion blender? it looks like this. So it's just something, a small handheld blender that you can use to put into a drink, to make a milkshake. I use it a lot in the crock pot whenever I'm making soups, to blend up all the vegetables inside my soup to make a good puree. If you don't have an immersion blender, that's okay. What you're going to do is put this berry coulis into your blender. But before you do that, let this berry coulis cool off just a little bit, because it's hard to put hot things in a blender successfully. You need to cool this off for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then put it in your blender and put a towel over the lid of that blender before you start your blender up. Otherwise, an increase of heat with a trapped amount of fluid in there is going to lead to some sort of explosion that you don't want to be responsible for. So let that sauce cool off before you put it in your blender, if that's what you use. Otherwise, this immersion blender, they're probably $15 to buy them. I just borrowed it from my mom about 10 years ago. Okay, kitchen pals, the next thing we're gonna do is pour our coulis into a strainer that I have set over a bowl here. We just wanna get all those raspberry seeds out, because that's not always super pleasant to bite into. Okay, kitchen pals, I've mashed all my berries through that fine sieve. So I've got a little bit of my raspberry coulis here. I'm going to refrigerate this so it cools off while we're making the rest of our berry parfait. We only have a couple more steps left to do. But I thought I would share with you that while we're going to use this in our berry parfait today, I'm going to set some aside for a couple of reasons. One, I think a splash of this in my orange juice tomorrow morning for breakfast will be divine. Two, I made some brownies last night with my boyfriend, and I think a little bit of this drizzled on top of a brownie would be amazing. I also think it would be good as you're baking brownies to swirl a little bit of this into your brownie batter. Just that chocolate and berry flavor mixed together is really good. One more note for the grown-ups that are listening. I think this would also be really fun as a berry mimosa. So maybe add a little bit of this to some bubbly for brunch and have a special little festive mimosa would be really delightful. Okay, kitchen pals, next up, we're gonna make our homemade whipped cream for our berry parfaits. So I've got my mixer all lined up and ready to go with the whisk attachment. You might have a handheld mixer with a bowl that you can use as well. That's totally fine. We also, when I was a kid, we used to use one of those hand crank whisks, which I thought was really fun. So maybe you have one of those ready too. I've got a container of heavy whipping cream, and I'm just gonna pour some of it into my bowl. I'm honestly not gonna measure this, but I bet I'm going to use about a cup of this. The thing about a recipe like this is you don't really need to measure things. You can kind of just get a sense for how much of it that you need. I know I added a tablespoon and a half of sugar to my berries, but maybe you like your berries to be really tart and you don't want to add sugar. Or maybe they're too tart for you and you need to add a little bit more sugar than what I added. That's totally up to you to do. Once we get further into baking and start doing some pastry things, we're going to get very precise with our measurements. But for now, we can just kind of play around with the amounts. So I'm going to whisk this heavy cream at a very high speed for a couple minutes until I get some soft peaks going. And I'll show you what those look like in case you don't know already. Okay, Kitchen Pals, I've had my mixer going on high speed for about a minute and a half now. And I just want you to see what this whipped cream looks like. So this is soft peaks where you can kind of run your finger through it and it'll hold its shape, but those peaks are a little flimsy of what is left over there. So I'm going to keep going with my mixer to get it into it's a little bit firmer peak. But what I'll do before that is I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of powdered sugar and just a splash of vanilla. Okay, Kitchen Pal. So I just went basically another minute with my mixer on high again on my whipped cream, and it's so much thicker now. You can see those stiff peaks are formed now in our whipping cream. Ooh, can you see that? There's like a ridge run through that from where I just swiped my finger, which is quite delicious. You actually can go too far with this, and then it turns into butter, which also not a bad thing that you've done there. So now we're going to assemble our berry parfaits. So I'm going to start with blue at the bottom. So I'm going to add a couple of blueberries here. And then I'm going to add a spoonful of this whipping cream right down in the bottom there. And then I'm going to add a spoonful of this berry coulis. So now we've got one layer of red, white, and blue. I'm going to do a couple more layers of this, honestly. It's going to be a nice little parfait here. I don't know, Kitchen Pals. What do you say? One more layer of these three? Let's do one more layer. Hey, Kitchen Pals, look at this berry parfait that we've made. You can see the blueberries, the raspberry coulis, the whipping cream that we made from scratch. It's so nice to see these red, white, and blue colors all together. And what a nice patriotic treat to have on a Veterans Day when we honor those who have served and protected our country. Thanks to all our veterans. Thank you for your service. Next week, we're gonna make a fall-inspired cookie. So make sure you have on hand some pretty typical cookie ingredients. And then also two special ingredients, some instant apple cider mix and a bag of wrapped caramels. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and have a grown-up email me if you have any questions about the recipe we made this week. Until next time, enjoy your food, Kitchen Pals.